A traitor to his country, that was the brand Schiff had spent years perfecting, a weapon he wielded with the cold precision of a master propagandist. In less than 3 hours, he would use it to permanently silence Tulsi Gabbard. But he was about to learn a brutal lesson, taught by the very soldier he sought to disgrace. When you hunt a warrior, you must be certain you are not the one walking into the kill zone. What followed was not a hearing, it was an execution, broadcast live for the world to see. Smash that like button, subscribe, and stay until the end to witness the most shocking political takedown in modern history. The air in the Hart Senate office building was thick with a predatory stillness. Schiff, congressman and self-appointed guardian of American democracy, felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded a public crucifixion. He adjusted the knot on his silk tie, a small, satisfying gesture of control. Today, he was the inquisitor, the prosecutor, and the judge. Tulsi Gabbard, the nominee for Director of National Intelligence, was merely the sacrifice. His team, a bustling hive of ambitious young aides, had stacked binders on the table behind him, each one a monument to their exhaustive opposition research. They were filled with what he considered kill shots, photographs of Gabbard meeting with foreign leaders he deemed unsavory, transcripts of her speeches questioning endless foreign wars, and a web of connections spun to look like a traitor's conspiracy. He glanced at the mountain of paper and felt a swell of pride. It was overwhelming, undeniable. It was a masterpiece of political destruction. He had no way of knowing that the true masterpiece of destruction in the room was sitting across from him, a sleek, silver laptop that held the digital ghost of his every crime. At precisely 9:55 a.m., the doors swung open and Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard entered. She moved with an economy of motion that seemed alien in the performative world of Washington, D.C. It was the walk of someone who had navigated minefields, not motorcades. She carried no binders, no stacks of paper. In one hand, she held a single, deceptively thin manila folder, in the other, her laptop. Schiff's senior aide, a man whose ambition made him cruel, leaned in and whispered, "That's it." "That's all she has." Schiff allowed himself a thin, confident smile. "She's coming to a gunfight with a knife." This will be over before lunch, but across the room, in the gallery packed with spectators, a different assessment was being made. A retired Army Ranger, his face a roadmap of deployments, nudged the man next to him. "See that laptop," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "That's her rifle. He just thinks it's a briefcase." The contrast between the two figures was a story in itself. Schiff was a creature of the swamp, his suit immaculate, his gestures broad and theatrical, his energy a nervous thrum under the hot television lights. He was already dabbing a bead of sweat from his temple with a handkerchief. Gabbard, in a simple but sharp charcoal suit, radiated a profound calm. Her posture was perfect, her gaze steady. On her lapel, almost invisible to the civilian eye but a beacon to every veteran present, was the combat medical badge, a small pin signifying grace under unimaginable fire. As she settled at the witness table, her aide, a young woman with the intense, focused eyes of a former signals intelligence operator, briefly showed her a screen. Gabbard glanced at it, then at her watch, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. It was not the nervous smile of a defendant preparing for an ordeal. It was the quiet, confident smile of a sniper who has just confirmed the target is in the crosshairs, blissfully unaware of the danger. At 10 a.m. sharp, Chairman Wicker's gavel cracked, calling the room to order. "This committee will now come to order. We are here today to consider the nomination of Mr. Chairman." Schiff was on his feet in an instant, his voice booming with practiced indignation, a performance he had honed over hundreds of hours of cable news appearances. "I rise on a point of personal privilege to address a matter of grave national security. We must not, consider placing a known Russian sympathizer, a puppet of our adversaries, at the head of our nation's intelligence agencies." The words, designed for the evening news sound bites, hung in the air. In the gallery, a ripple of anger went through the rows of veterans. Shoulders stiffened, jaws tightened. Gabbard, however, remained impassive. She simply picked up a pen, her movements deliberate, and began to write on a notepad, that same faint smile playing on her lips. She was not rattled, she was documenting. This nominee has a documented history of parroting Kremlin propaganda, Schiff continued, his voice rising in a crescendo he believed was devastating. She has betrayed our allies in Syria. She has given comfort to dictators. When a true patriot like Hillary Clinton called her out for what she is, a Russian asset, she attacked the messenger. Congressman Schiff, Gabbard's voice was not loud, but it sliced through Schiff's performance with the sharpness of a surgeon's scalpel. The room fell instantly silent, every eye snapped at her. "Thank you for that opening statement," she said, her tone even and dangerously polite. "You have raised some very serious topics: foreign influence, propaganda, loyalty, and fitness to handle the nation's secrets. I agree these are vital matters, so perhaps before we proceed with your prepared attacks, we could engage in a brief exercise. Let's call it a comparative integrity analysis." A chill, sudden and unwelcome, snaked down Schiff's spine. His hand, which had been reaching for his first binder of evidence, froze in midair. There was a predatory quality in her voice, a shift in the dynamics of the room so profound he could feel it in his bones. The hunter's instinct that had served him so well was now screaming a single, silent word: trap. "You see, Congressman," Gabbard continued, her voice maintaining its unnerving calm as she deliberately glanced at her watch, a gesture that now seemed less about timekeeping and more like a countdown. "I did not spend the last several weeks preparing to defend myself against the predictable smears you have spent your career perfecting. That would be a waste of this committee's valuable time. Instead, I prepared for this moment by compiling a dossier on a far more insidious threat to our republic: the systematic corruption of our intelligence agencies for partisan warfare." Her aide, with a precision that spoke of military training, slid the silver laptop directly in front of her. Gabbard placed her hands on it, not opening it yet, letting the moment hang in the air. "My time in the military taught me that the most effective ambushes are the ones your enemy helps you set. Their arrogance becomes your cover, their belief in their own impunity becomes your greatest weapon. They build their own cage, and all you have to do is lock the door." She lifted her gaze from the laptop and locked eyes with Schiff. For the first time, the raw, unfiltered intensity of her focus hit him like a physical blow. The practiced politician in him vanished, replaced by a primal fear. He was no longer looking at a political rival. He was looking at a predator who had patiently waited for him to wander into her sights. The veterans in the gallery saw it, too. They leaned forward, a collective, silent recognition passing between them. This was the moment the battle turned. "So please," Gabbard invited, her voice laced with a chilling courtesy, "proceed with your accusations, but understand this. For every charge you level against me, I am prepared to counter with documented proof of your own far greater transgressions. For every question you raise about my patriotism, I will answer with irrefutable evidence of your betrayals." This laptop, she finally opened the lid, the screen casting a cool blue light on her face, contains a meticulously authenticated record of your activities over the past 5 years. Your emails, your text messages, your encrypted chats, and your recorded conversations. All legally obtained from courageous whistleblowers. All painting a picture of corruption so profound it constitutes a grave threat to our national security. Schiff's aide, a young man named David, grabbed his boss's arm, his face ashen. "Sir, we need to reassess," he hissed, his voice trembling. The blood had drained from Schiff's face, leaving a sickly, pale sheen under the hot lights. A single drop of sweat traced a path down his temple. I don't know what game you're playing," he stammered, the eloquent, prosecutorial cadence he was famous for shattering into 1,000 pieces. "Oh, but you do," Gabbard replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper yet carrying to every corner of the silent room. "You know exactly what's on this laptop, Adam. You know the lies you told." You know the secrets you leaked. You know the lives you destroyed. The only question is whether you want to force me to reveal it all right here, right now, in front of the entire world. In the gallery, the retired ranger grinned, a grim, satisfied expression on his face. "Checkmate," he whispered to his friend. "He just doesn't have the sense to lay down as king." The trap was not just set, it was sprung. The bait Schiff's own hubris had been taken, and the jaws of accountability were closing. Adam Schiff stood paralyzed, his mind a frantic whirlwind of panicked calculations. 5 years of backroom deals, of whispered conspiracies with media allies, of classified leaks spun into public narratives. How could she know who had betrayed him? He reached for his glass of water, his hand shaking so violently that the water sloshed over the rim. He couldn't retreat, not now. The cameras were rolling. His entire career was built on the perception of invincibility. He had to believe she was bluffing. These are desperate, baseless threats from a nominee who cannot defend her own record, he declared, trying to force the familiar ring of authority back into his voice. Gabbard's laugh was soft, almost inaudible, but it cut him deeper than any shout. "Congressman, you have built a career on redefining the word truth to mean whatever is politically convenient, so let's talk about my record. Let's start with your favorite talking point, my foreign contacts." She slid a single piece of paper from her thin folder. "You mentioned my 2017 trip to Syria. You called it a betrayal. What you failed to mention is that it was a bipartisan congressional delegation fully approved by the House Ethics Committee, and its purpose was to assess the reality on the ground. A practice one would think is essential for anyone involved in foreign policy. It was funded by Assad sympathizers." Schiff shot back, grasping at the talking point his team had crafted. "Was it?" Gabbard asked, her eyes flicking to her laptop screen. "Because according to an email you sent to a producer at CNN on February 3, 2017, you wrote, and I quote, 'The funding for Gabbard's Syria trip appears clean, but the optics are what matter. Let's frame it as shadowy pro-Assad group to undermine her credibility.' Shall the first display the full email, Congressman? The part where you brainstorm how to use my fact-finding mission to paint me as a traitor." Schiff's throat went dry. His gulp was audible on the hot mic. Across the room, at the press table, a well-known CNN anchor had gone ghost white and was now typing furiously on his phone, not reporting, but communicating. "And as for my media appearances," Gabbard continued, her tone conversational, "I have a simple philosophy. I will speak to anyone, the BBC, Al Jazeera, Fox News, and yes, even Russian state media, because I believe in engaging with both allies and adversaries. It's called diplomacy. You, on the other hand, seem to believe only in preaching to the choir." Her fingers moved deftly across the keyboard. "But since we're on the topic of media, perhaps you'd like to discuss your own media strategy. For instance, your signal chats with producers at MSNBC from April 2019, where you coordinated the timing of a leak to ensure maximum emotional impact during prime time. Or maybe your conversations with Twitter executives on how to amplify certain narratives while suppressing others that were inconvenient to your agenda." That's completely false." Schiff stammered, sweat now soaking the collar of his shirt. "Is it?" Gabbard countered. "The whistleblowers from your own staff, people who grew tired of watching you use a congressional committee as a political weapon, provided us with the receipts. People who believe intelligence oversight should be about protecting the country, not persecuting your political enemies." She shifted her focus from Schiff, turning to address the committee members directly, her voice now imbued with the gravitas of a stateswoman. "What Congressman Schiff labels as Russian propaganda is, in reality, a simple and profound disagreement with his interventionist ideology. In his worldview, any American who dares to question the wisdom of perpetual war, anyone who suggests that diplomacy might be a more effective tool than drone strikes, must be a foreign agent. It is a dangerously simplistic and paranoid mindset, one that has cost this nation dearly in both blood and treasure." You defended Putin's aggression, Schiff blurted out, a desperate, flailing attack. It was a line he had used 100 times on television, and it had always worked before. No, Congressman, I did not, Gabbard corrected him, her patience unwavering. I explained the complex geopolitical history and the consequences of NATO expansion that many esteemed foreign policy experts, from George Kennan to John Mearsheimer, warned about for decades. Is it your assertion that these distinguished scholars are also Russian assets? Or is it simply that you are incapable of understanding a perspective that does not fit into your narrow, alarmist narrative? True national security requires understanding our adversaries, not creating cartoon villains to justify a bloated defense budget. She leaned forward, her posture commanding the attention of everyone in the room, including the senators who had begun to exchange uneasy glances. The truly fascinating thing about your accusations, Congressman, is the psychological projection at their core. Every single tactic you accuse me of spreading disinformation, colluding with foreign interests, betraying the trust of the American people is a precise description of your own actions. And unlike your baseless smears against me, I have come prepared with proof. The laptop screen brightened, illuminating her face as she navigated to a specific file. The click of the trackpad echoed in the silent room like the cocking of a hammer. So, where should we begin this comparative integrity analysis? Shall we start with the 2 years you spent saturating the airwaves with lies about Russian collusion, all while knowing from classified briefings that there was no evidence? Or should we jump ahead to the Ukraine impeachment, where you not only fabricated the contents of a presidential phone call but also secretly coached the whistleblower while lying about it to the public? Or perhaps we could discuss a more personal project of yours using the powerful surveillance tools of the House Intelligence Committee to spy on your political rivals, journalists, and even their lawyers. You can't. Schiff sputtered, a wave of panic washing over him. Those are classified proceedings. You are violating the law by even mentioning them. Wrong again, Gabbard said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. I'm not referring to classified intelligence. I am referring to your personal emails, your unclassified but deeply unethical strategy memos, your text messages with media collaborators, and your recorded conversations with witnesses you were supposed to be overseeing. All of it was provided to me by patriotic Americans who could no longer stomach your flagrant abuse of power. From the days Senator Josh Hawley, known for his sharp legal mind, leaned into his microphone. Ms. Gabbard, are you alleging that you possess evidence that Congressman Schiff has engaged in criminal activity? I am alleging, Senator, Gabbard replied, choosing her words with surgical care, that Congressman Schiff has spent the last 5 years systematically weaponizing the intelligence apparatus for his own political enrichment, all while cloaking his actions in the noble language of patriotism. The evidence I am about to present will demonstrate, beyond any reasonable doubt, who the real threat to American democracy has been. She checked her watch again. The gesture was now clearly a piece of deliberate theater, a signal that a critical phase of her operation was beginning. We have just under 2 hours remaining for this hearing. I can assure you, by the time this session is concluded, every person in this room and every American watching at home will have a crystal clear understanding of why I am qualified to lead our intelligence community, and why Congressman Schiff should be the subject of a federal investigation. The gallery, which had been holding its collective breath, erupted in a wave of murmurs. Democratic senators were now in open, frantic consultation with their aides. Senator Warner, the ranking Democrat on the committee, had his head in his hands, looking as though he had just witnessed a catastrophic accident. Schiff stood alone at his microphone, a solitary, pathetic figure. The room, which he had entered as his personal arena, had transformed into his public trial. The hunter was now trapped, wounded, and surrounded. So please, Congressman, Gabbard concluded, her voice a model of deadly politeness, by all means, continue with your questions about my fitness for office. I welcome them because every accusation you make will serve as a new opportunity for me to present another piece of evidence of your own corruption. Every smear you attempt will be met with a documented truth. Your move, Congressman. Choose your next words very, very wisely. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a political career ending, of a powerful man realizing he was utterly and completely destroyed. The ambush was complete. The slaughter was about to be televised. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Adam Schiff remained frozen, a statue of disbelief and terror. The carefully constructed world he had built, a world where his words were truth and his enemies were traitors, was crumbling around him. The binders of evidence on the table behind him now seemed like a pathetic joke, a pile of paper swords brought to a nuclear conflict. Chairman Wicker, his expression a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity, finally broke the silence. Congressman Schiff, do you have a question for the nominee? Schiff's political instincts, honed over decades of partisan combat, made one last, desperate surge. He could not be seen to retreat. Of course, Mr. Chairman, he managed to say, his voice thin and reedy. Ms. Gabbard's theatrical deflections do not change the facts of her record. Before we continue down that path, Gabbard interjected, her timing perfect. I believe it is essential for the committee and the American people to establish a baseline of credibility. After all, when a man makes accusations as serious as treason, his own relationship with the truth becomes paramount. She opened the thin manila folder for the first time and withdrew a single sheet of paper. Congressman Schiff, you have built your modern political identity on the idea that you are the nation's foremost expert on Russian disinformation. You have claimed that anyone who disagrees with your foreign policy consensus is, by definition, a purveyor of Kremlin talking points. So, let's begin by examining your own impeccable record on that very subject. Schiff's aide, David, who had been frantically texting, now looked up with wide, terrified eyes. He shook his head almost imperceptibly, a desperate, silent plea for his boss to stop. But Schiff, blinded by a fatal combination of pride and panic, ignored him. My record in exposing Russian interference in our democracy is a matter of public record and has been praised as heroic. Heroic, Gabbard repeated, the word hanging in the air, stripped of its meaning. Her aide handed her the laptop, and she opened it with the calm, deliberate motions of someone handling a sacred text. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would like to present to the committee some materials that speak directly to the congressman's credibility on matters of Russian influence and his definition of truth. Wicker, now completely engrossed in the unfolding drama, nodded slowly. Proceed, Ms. Gabbard. The large display screens throughout the hearing room, previously showing the committee seal, flickered to life. Schiff's heart hammered against his ribs as he recognized the interface, the internal email system of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. His digital sanctum had been breached. These emails, Mr. Chairman, Gabbard announced, her voice resonating with cold clarity, were provided by a whistleblower. Not a political operative, but a career intelligence analyst on Congressman Schiff's own staff. A patriot who swore an oath to the Constitution, not to a political party, and who could no longer participate in what they described as the intentional, systematic deception of the American public. The first email materialized on the screens, its stark black text a death sentence. FROM, Adam Schiff opening parenthesis adam.schiff@hpsci.house. GOV2, HPSCI Staff Distribution List Date, March 23, 2017 Subject, Narrative Strategy, Russia Team. I just finished a call with CNN. It is vital that we keep the Russia collusion story in the headlines. The facts are secondary right now. The perception of compromise is everything. I need you to find any connection, no matter how tenuous. We need to feed the narrative. The fate of our democracy depends on the public believing Trump is illegitimate. A collective gasp swept through the gallery. Reporters who had been half listening, assuming this was just another partisan squabble, were now hunched over their keyboards, their fingers flying. Where did you get that? Schiff's voice was a choked whisper. "Those are internal committee communications. They are unclassified communications regarding political media strategy," Gabbard corrected him calmly. "It is telling, however, that your first instinct is to hide behind a shield of classification. Does that happen often? Do you find the line between legitimate intelligence work and partisan political operations to be a blurry one?" She clicked, and a new email appeared. FROM, Adam Schiff opening parenthesis adam.schiff@hpsci.house.gov 2, David Axelrod opening parenthesis d.axelrod@gmail.com date. May 10, 2017 Subject, Mueller David, I spoke with a contact on Mueller's team. They are frustrated. They have nothing concrete on collusion after months of digging. We cannot let this get out. I will go on the lead this afternoon and state that I have seen more than circumstantial evidence of collusion. Tapper won't press me for details. The goal is to keep the investigation going. The process itself is the punishment. These could be forgeries. Schiff protested, his voice cracking. Sweat was now pouring down his face, his expensive suit feeling like a wool blanket in a sauna. They could be, Gabbard conceded with an unnerving placidity. Which is why we had their authenticity and metadata verified by 3 separate, independent cybersecurity firms. We also possess the server logs and, more importantly, sworn affidavits from multiple former staff members who will testify, under oath, about the instructions you gave them. She turned back to the committee. For more than 2 years, Congressman Schiff appeared on national television almost nightly. He told the American people with a straight face that he had seen clear, definitive, and direct evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. He looked into the camera and declared their president a Russian agent. Another document flashed onto the screen. It was a transcript from a closed-door, classified HPSCI hearing, Rep. Nunes, Adam, to be clear for the record, we have received no intelligence that provides direct evidence of a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. Is that correct, Rep. Schiff? Inaudible ... in this room? Yes. But what we say in here and what we must project to the public are two very different things for the good of the country. $32 million, Gabbard said, her voice low and heavy with the weight of the number. That was the cost of the Mueller investigation to the American taxpayer. 2 years of a nation divided, of a government paralyzed, of lives and reputations destroyed by leaks and innuendo. And all of it, every last bit of it, was built on a foundation of lies. Lies that Congressman Schiff knew were lies from the very beginning. From the back of the gallery, a man in a crisp suit suddenly shot to his feet. "You ruined me," he screamed, his voice raw with pain, pointing a trembling finger at Schiff. "I was mentioned in one of your leaks, a footnote in a story about potential Russian contacts. My consulting business was destroyed overnight. My clients fled. It was all a lie." Security officers started moving toward the man, but Chairman Wicker waved them off. "Let him speak," he commanded. The man's voice trembled with a mixture of rage and sorrow. "Carter Page ... George Papadopoulos ... General Flynn ... How many lives did you shatter with your ambition? How many families did you bankrupt for what? For political power? Sir, I ... double quotes Schiff began, but the man cut him off. "I served this country for 25 years in the State Department. And you smug, arrogant man, you branded me a traitor on national television based on nothing, absolutely nothing." The man sank back into his seat, physically and emotionally spent, supported by the solemn figures of the veterans around him. The raw, human cost of Schiff's political machinations had just been given a voice, and it was devastating. Gabbard allowed the weight of the moment to settle, the silence in the room amplifying the man's anguished testimony. "The cost was never just financial, Congressman," she continued, her voice resonating with a quiet power. "It was institutional. It was a wound inflicted on the very soul of our republic. You took the sacred trust placed in our intelligence agencies designed to protect us from foreign enemies, and you turned them into a political bludgeon to be used against your fellow Americans. In your obsessive quest to destroy a president you despised, you did more damage to the American people's faith in their own government than any foreign adversary could ever hope to achieve. She gestured to the screen where a new graphic appeared. It was a line chart from the Pew Research Center, stark and brutal in its simplicity. It showed a catastrophic collapse in public trust for the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA between 2017 and 2019. Vladimir Putin did not create this, she said, tapping the screen for emphasis. You did. He could have spent billions on a disinformation campaign and not achieved a fraction of the institutional damage you managed to inflict for free. All while claiming to be the one protecting us from him. The Mueller report did find extensive Russian interference, Schiff countered weakly, clinging to the last remaining pillar of his narrative. Yes, it did, Gabbard agreed, a fact that was widely known and not in dispute. What it did not find, after 2 years and tens of millions of dollars, was the central claim of your entire crusade: collusion. Yet you went on television week after week and insisted the evidence was in plain sight and overwhelming. You lied, Congressman. You lied repeatedly, you lied deliberately, and you lied with malice. Another email flashed onto the screen. This one was different, sent from a staffer's personal, encrypted email address to a private account. FROM, redacted at protonmail.com 2, redacted date. July 12, 2018. Subject: I can't do this anymore. I'm writing this from a personal account because I'm terrified. What we are doing is wrong. The congressman knows there is no there on collusion. He says it in closed sessions, but then he goes straight to the CNN green room and says the opposite. He calls it shaping the narrative for the greater good. But how is it good to ruin innocent people? How is it good to turn the FBI into the enforcement arm of a political party? I joined this committee to serve my country, not to participate in a slow-motion coup. That staff member, Gabbard said, her voice softening with respect, came forward at immense personal risk. They provided these documents not for fame or money, but because their conscience would no longer allow them to be complicit in your corruption of our democratic institutions. The entire dynamic of the hearing had been irrevocably altered. What was intended as a confirmation hearing for Tulsi Gabbard had become the public trial of Adam Schiff. The Democratic senators on the committee, who had arrived with their own prepared attacks on Gabbard, were now a study in panic. Senator Feinstein was whispering urgently to an aide. Senator Warner was furiously texting, no doubt crafting a statement to distance himself from the toxic fallout. But perhaps the most damning evidence of all, Gabbard announced, is simply a compilation of your own words. The screen dissolved into a rapid-fire montage. Clip after clip of Adam Schiff on every major news network, his face a mask of solemn certainty. There is ample evidence of collusion in plain sight. CNN, March 2017. I can't go into specifics, but I can say that the evidence is more than circumstantial. MSNBC, May 2017. The walls are closing in. ABC, September 2017. We have seen definitive proof of a conspiracy. CBS, December 2018. Dozens of clips played, a relentless drumbeat of deceit. And alongside them, on a split screen, flashed excerpts from the classified testimonies he had been privy to. No direct evidence of conspiracy found. Witness denies any contact with Russian officials. Investigation has not established a collusive link. The contrast was sickening, a visual representation of a massive, years-long fraud perpetrated on the American people. You knew, Gabbard said simply as the montage faded to black, leaving Schiff's face on the screen. Every single time you stood before a camera and told the American people that their president was a traitor, you knew it was a lie. Every time you selectively leaked a piece of information to create a false and sinister narrative, you knew what you were doing. Every time you claimed to have seen evidence that you knew did not exist, you were consciously and deliberately deceiving the nation. Schiff's hands were now trembling uncontrollably. His perfectly coiffed hair was a mess where he had anxiously run his hands through it. The confident, powerful prosecutor who had entered the room just an hour ago was gone, replaced by a man watching his legacy being rewritten before his eyes, from hero to villain. I was acting to protect our national security, he stammered, the words sounding hollow and pathetic even to his own ears. No, Gabbard replied, her voice firm and clear as a bell. You were acting to protect your political agenda. And in the process, you became the very thing you accused others of being, an agent of chaos, a purveyor of disinformation, and a catalyst for institutional decay. You did Vladimir Putin's work for him more effectively than any of his own spies, and you did it while wrapping yourself in the American flag. She closed the laptop with a soft, decisive click. The sound was like a gavel falling, a verdict being rendered. So, Congressman, when you stand here and question my fitness to oversee our nation's intelligence agencies, when you accuse me of being susceptible to foreign propaganda, I have to ask, on what grounds do you possibly believe you have the moral authority to judge anyone's relationship with the truth? The silence that engulfed the room was profound and absolute. It was the sound of a career ending, of a reputation being vaporized. In the gallery, reporters were filing their stories with a frenzy, the headlines already writing themselves. The veterans sat in grim, quiet vindication. And Adam Schiff stood at the microphone, his mouth agape, a man utterly exposed with nothing left to say. The hunter was not just trapped, he was eviscerated. But Tulsi Gabbard was not done. This was merely the first wound. Schiff's chief aide, David, made a final, desperate gambit. He tugged hard on his boss's sleeve, whispering with frantic urgency, "Sir, for God's sake, sit down. Say you're feeling unwell. Anything, just stop." But Schiff was trapped in the grip of a peculiar political psychosis, the kind that afflicts those who have been powerful for too long. He had never lost a public fight, never been successfully challenged. The idea of retreat was more terrifying than the certainty of further destruction. He shook off his aide's hand, his face a mask of desperate defiance, Those emails are taken out of context, he insisted, his voice raspy. The Russia investigation was a legitimate and necessary act of congressional oversight. Context, Gabbard repeated, her eyebrows arching slightly, an interesting choice of word. Very well, Congressman, let's discuss context. Let's add some context to your other legitimate oversight activities. Specifically, let's talk about your pivotal role in the impeachment of the president over a phone call with Ukraine. She reached for a new folder, this one a stark, clinical white. David, the aide, let out an audible groan and buried his face in his hands. Across the days, the political distancing was becoming almost comical. Senator Feinstein had physically angled her chair away from Schiff as if his corruption were contagious. On September 26, 2019, Gabbard began, her voice adopting the measured cadence of a prosecutor laying out a case. You convened and chaired a hearing of the Intelligence Committee. During that hearing, you chose to perform what you later described as a parody of the president's phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Do you recall that, Congressman? It was clearly stated to be a parody. Schiff shot back, a flicker of his old confidence returning. This was a fight he had rehearsed, was it? Gabbard's aide handed her a tablet because the millions of Americans who only saw the 30-second clip on the evening news, a clip your staff strategically pushed to friendly media outlets, heard no such disclaimer. They heard what they were told was a direct reading of the call. Let's refresh the committee's memory. The hearing room screens flickered to life once more, this time with C-SPAN footage of Schiff himself sitting in the chairman's seat, his face a mask of grave seriousness. I'm going to read you the essence of what the president communicates. Schiff's voice from the past filled the room. We've been very good to your country. Very good. No other country has done as much. But you know what? I don't see much reciprocity. I have a favor I want from you, though. And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent. Understand, lots of it. Gabbard paused the video. That was your parody, Congressman. Now let's compare that to the actual, declassified transcript of the call. A side-by-side comparison appeared. On one side, Schiff's lurid, mob boss-like invention. On the other, the far more mundane reality of the official transcript. The two bore no resemblance. You turned a solemn constitutional proceeding into a piece of cheap political theater, Gabbard stated. But that, as disturbing as it is not the most sinister part of the story. She swiped on the tablet, bringing up a new file. What is truly damning is what you did before that hearing, Mr. Chairman. I would now like to play for the committee an audio recording. This recording was legally made by one of the participants, who later provided it as a matter of conscience. Schiff's face went completely white. What recording? There is no recording. The audio began, crisp and clear, through the room's speakers. It was unmistakably Schiff's voice, but it was different, conspiratorial, urgent, stripped of its public pomposity. Schiff, look, your complaint has to be perfect, watertight. The most important thing is that you cannot mention any prior contact with my staff. It will discredit the entire effort. Unknown voice muffled, but Congressman, I'm not sure. Schiff, listen to me. You came to us because you are a patriot, concerned for the nation's security. Correct, then let us handle the strategy. You just need to convey your genuine alarm. We will build the legal and media framework around it. Unknown voice, what about the initial conversations I had with your staffer, Schiff? That never happened. As far as the world is concerned, you are an independent whistleblower who followed official channels, and we have had no contact. Is that understood? The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than before. The furious clicking of reporters' keyboards was the only sound. That, Gabbard said, her voice dropping to a quiet, damning tone, was you, Congressman, on a conference call on September 15, 2019. You were coaching the man who would become known as the Ukraine whistleblower. 11 days later, you would sit in that very chairman's seat and lie to Congress and the American people, claiming you had no prior contact with him. That recording is. It's doctored. It's illegal, Schiff stammered, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route that didn't exist. It is neither, Gabbard stated flatly. It was recorded by the whistleblower's own legal counsel, who grew deeply uncomfortable with the political nature of the operation and feared they were being drawn into a conspiracy to defraud Congress. They provided it to investigators. Along with corroborating notes and timelines, she turned her gaze back to the stunned committee members. This is the man who lectures the nation about disinformation and foreign influence. A man who secretly coached a witness, helped craft a complaint, and then lied about his role in it, not just to the public, but under oath in a congressional proceeding. Senator Lindsey Graham, who had been watching with a look of grim fascination, finally spoke. Ms. Gabbard, let me be clear. Are you asserting that Congressman Schiff, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, orchestrated the very whistleblower complaint that triggered a presidential impeachment? I am presenting the evidence, Senator, Gabbard replied, her voice a study in careful precision. The evidence shows that Congressman Schiff had extensive, undisclosed contact with the whistleblower before the complaint was ever filed. The evidence shows he coached that whistleblower on what to include and what to omit. The evidence shows he then lied about that contact to the American public and to his colleagues. The conclusions, I believe, are self-evident. From the gallery, another voice, younger this time, cried out, "My sister was a diplomat at the Kiev embassy. The chaos your impeachment stunt caused put American lives in danger. This was never about national security. It was about your political games. The trap was now complete. Every lie Schiff had told was a bar in his own cage. Every piece of evidence he had manufactured was now a stone weighing him down. His own words, his own recordings, his own actions had become the instruments of his destruction. The committee members were no longer just distancing themselves. They were looking at him with a mixture of horror and contempt. The man who had set out to destroy a president had been exposed as having attempted to orchestrate a coup. Schiff made one last, pathetic attempt to claw his way out of the abyss. The president's call was a clear abuse of power. It was an attempt to solicit foreign interference. Was it? Gabbard countered, her tone dripping with ice. She produced another document from the white folder. Because I have here the official transcript of your own phone call, Congressman, with two individuals you believe to be Ukrainian parliamentarians, dated May 2018. In reality, they were Russian comedians known for prank-calling high-level officials. Let's review your words. She read from the transcript, her voice devoid of emotion. We will do everything we can to help you, you told them. And we would be very interested in any compromising material you have on Donald Trump, anything at all. Financial records, personal indiscretions. This is a matter of utmost importance for our national security. You then proceeded to give them a secure drop location for them to send this compromat. She looked up from the paper, her eyes boring into him. Using your own standard, Congressman, should you have been impeached for that call? Or is soliciting foreign dirt only a crime when your political opponents do it? The trap was now not just a cage. It was a hall of mirrors, reflecting Schiff's own hypocrisy back at him from every conceivable angle. He had no escape. His allies on the committee had fallen silent, their faces grim masks of damage control. They were no longer thinking about defending him, only about how to survive the blast radius of his implosion. But there's more, Gabbard continued, her voice relentless, a steady drumbeat of revelation. The pattern of deception goes far beyond coaching a single whistleblower. She produced a thick stack of papers and placed them on the table with a heavy thud. These are sworn affidavits from career intelligence community officials. Inspectors general, senior analysts, department heads. Men and women who have served this country for decades under administrations of both parties. And they all tell the same story, a story of pressure, of threats, and of political coercion, all originating from your office. She held up the first affidavit. This is from a 20-year veteran of the CIA, an analyst specializing in Eastern Europe. He states, under penalty of perjury, that you and your staff personally threatened to re-evaluate his security clearance and open an investigation into his foreign contacts if he did not amend his assessment of the Zelensky call to conclude that a crime had been committed. That's preposterous. Schiff gasped, but the words had no force. Is it? Gabbard held up a second document. This is from a State Department official who was on the original call. He testifies that you told him in a private meeting, and I quote, "I don't give a damn what you think you heard. We are on the verge of removing a corrupt president, and you will not be the one to stand in the way of history." That does not sound like a man conducting legitimate oversight, Congressman. That sounds like a man orchestrating a political hit. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp, coup. Even some of the Republican senators, who were privately reveling in Schiff's demise, shifted uncomfortably at the term, but Gabbard pressed her advantage. What other word describes it when a high-ranking member of Congress manufactures evidence, coerces witnesses, lies under oath, and weaponizes the intelligence apparatus to remove a duly elected president from office? When you subvert the very institutions of democracy in the name of saving it, you are not a patriot. You are an insurrectionist in a suit and tie. She looked directly at Schiff, who seemed to have physically shrunken, his suit now looking 2 sizes too big for his collapsing frame. You stood on this very floor and called me a Russian asset because I dared to question the foreign policy establishment. But you, Congressman, you actively worked to overturn the result of a democratic election through a campaign of systematic deception and manipulation. So I ask you again, which one of us is the real threat to this republic? The screens changed one last time. It was a montage of newspaper headlines and cable news chirons from the past 5 years. Public trust in Congress hits historic low. Gallup Americans increasingly view FBI and CIA as politicized. Pew Research partisan warfare paralyzes Washington. The New York Times China and Russia exploit U.S. Political chaos. The Wall Street Journal. This, Gabbard said, her voice quiet but carrying immense weight, is your true legacy, Congressman. You did not protect America. You poisoned it. You sowed such division, such chaos, such profound distrust in our own institutions that you created the perfect fertile ground for our actual enemies to flourish. You turned us against ourselves, and they simply sat back and watched. She closed the white folder with a quiet finality. So, when you question my fitness to lead, remember this: I have worn the uniform of this country. I have taken an oath to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I have held the hands of dying American soldiers who gave their last full measure of devotion for the ideals you have so casually trampled upon. What have you done, Congressman? What have you ever sacrificed for this country, other than its own integrity for the sake of your political ambition? The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of a single, slow clap from the gallery. It came from one of the veterans. Then another joined in, and another, until the entire section of former service members was on its feet, a thundering standing ovation rolling through the hearing room. It was not an ovation for the brutal spectacle of Schiff's destruction. It was an ovation for something they had not seen in Washington for a very long time: the raw, unvarnished, and triumphant power of truth. But even as the applause echoed, Tulsi Gabbard's expression remained unchanged. She was not smiling. She had more evidence to present, more truth to reveal. The political destruction of Adam Schiff was complete. His criminal exposure was about to begin. As the applause from the gallery finally subsided, compelled by Chairman Wicker's gavel, the new reality of the room began to set in. The Democratic side of the dais was in complete disarray. Senator Warner was in a hushed but furious conversation with his chief of staff, his gestures frantic. The atmosphere had moved beyond political damage control into the realm of criminal conspiracy. Schiff remained standing, a hollowed-out man propped up only by the microphone stand he was gripping with white knuckles. His aide, David, had given up completely and was now sitting behind him, staring blankly into space, a young man watching his own promising career in Washington burn to the ground as collateral damage. "Congressman," Gabbard said, her voice pulling the room back into focus, "since you seem so committed to this public forum on the nature of fitness and integrity, let's explore one final area of your oversight activities. Let's discuss your relationship with the Fourth Estate." She picked up a new device, a sleek black tablet that had been lying dormant on her table. As her aide connected it to the display system, David's blank stare sharpened into one of pure panic. He knew what was coming. "You see," Gabbard explained, her tone now that of a professor lecturing on the mechanics of tyranny. "When a government official selectively leaks classified or sensitive information to shape a political narrative, they are committing more than just a crime. They are fundamentally corrupting the purpose of a free press, transforming journalists from watchdogs into lapdogs." "I have never, ever leaked classified information," Schiff said, the denial automatic, reflexive, but utterly devoid of conviction. "Haven't you?" The screens lit up with the familiar interface of an encrypted messaging app. The contact name at the top was Jake T. CNN. The exchange was time-stamped March 2018. Schiff, ready for the afternoon drop. "Jake T. CNN. Always. What time are you leaking?" SCHIFF. 3 p.m. EST. "Give it 15 minutes to circulate online, then I want you to break in with breaking news." Jake T. CNN. Framing. SCHIFF. Bombshell revelation. Sources say the walls are closing in. The usual package. Jake T. CNN. Any actual substance this time? Schiff. Doesn't matter. The headline is the weapon. We're selling a narrative, not reporting facts. A wave of gasps and angry murmurs swept through the press corps section of the gallery. Journalists who had, for years, reported on Schiff's bombshells were now seeing the strings of their own puppetry laid bare. That, Gabbard noted dryly, was for a story about Paul Manafort's tax filings. Shall we look at another? More messages appeared. Schiff, I need you to kill that negative story about my committee's travel budget. It's a bad look. Jake T. CNN, Adam, that's not my call. It's a legitimate story, Schiff. I've given you 50 exclusive leaks over the past year. You owe me. Make the call. Jake T. CNN, I'll see what I can do, but you'll have to give me something big to trade for it. Schiff, how about a source says confirmation that Don Jr. is about to be indicted? Jake T. CNN, is he? Schiff, no, but who will know the difference for 48 hours? Run with it. A prominent CNN reporter in the gallery abruptly stood up, his face pale, and practically ran for the exit, his phone already pressed to his ear. He was followed by two others, a frantic exodus from a scene of journalistic self-immolation. This is not just unethical, Gabbard continued, her voice cutting through the chaos. This is a coordinated disinformation campaign orchestrated from within the halls of Congress. Congressman Schiff did not merely use the media. He transformed major news outlets into a propaganda arm for his political operations. She swiped, and a new chat thread appeared, this time with a producer at MSNBC. Schiff, I'll give you the closed-door testimony from the Hope Hicks interview. Exclusive, but I expect a full evening of coverage. MSNBC producer, you'll get it. What's the narrative? SCHIFF, devastating testimony confirms Trump's obstruction. Hicks breaks down under questioning. MSNBC producer, but the initial readout says she gave them nothing. Schiff, the actual transcript won't be released for weeks. By then, the public's perception will be set. Do you want the exclusive or not? The pattern is undeniable, Gabbard said, turning to the committee. Leak carefully selected, often misleading information. Work with friendly journalists to craft a sensational narrative. Control the media cycle for 24 to 48 hours. And by the time the full truth comes out, it's old news and the damage is already done. Facts were optional. Truth was an obstacle. Senator Josh Hawley leaned forward again. Ms. Gabbard, are you suggesting that Congressman Schiff repeatedly and knowingly violated his oath and federal law by leaking classified intelligence? I'm not suggesting it, Senator. I am presenting the evidence, she replied. Let's take one specific, unambiguous example. A new document filled the screens. It was a memo stamped Committee Confidential, dated December 7, 2017. This memo summarizes Donald Trump Jr.'s single quotes as testimony regarding the Trump Tower meeting, Gabbard explained. It was deemed confidential to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. Within 2 hours of this hearing concluding, CNN was on the air reporting specific, verbatim details from this very document. Let's see how that happened. Another text exchange appeared. Schiff, secure drop, 10 minutes, CNN contact, the Don Jr. stuff. Schiff, yes, I've highlighted the juiciest excerpts. Focus on the parts that sound suspicious out of context, ignore his full explanations. CNN contact, this is marked confidential. Adam, Schiff, your source is a person familiar with the testimony, plausible deniability. That's all you need. My staff, Gabbard said, consulting a notepad, has documented 47 separate instances between 2017 and 2020 where classified or committee confidential information was leaked from Congressman Schiff's committee and appeared in news reports within hours. Each leak was a felony. She produced a chart, a damning timeline of leaks and subsequent media appearances. The cycle was as predictable as it was corrupt. Leak in the afternoon, appear on primetime television that evening to express shock and grave concern about the breaking news he himself had orchestrated, but the most sinister revelation was yet to come. Perhaps the most egregious abuse of this power, Gabbard continued, her voice hardening. was your committee's acquisition and subsequent leaking of the phone records of private citizens in November 2019. Schiff, who had been swaying on his feet, visibly flinched. His aide, David, looked up, his face a mask of pure horror. He knew this was the point of no return. Under the guise of the impeachment inquiry, Gabbard explained, her voice now carrying the cold fury of righteous anger, Congressman Schiff's committee issued subpoenas to telecommunication companies, secretly obtaining the private phone records of journalists, a fellow member of Congress, and even the president's personal attorney. This was not oversight. This was a political dragnet. These records were then selectively leaked to create the sinister impression of a widespread conspiracy where none existed. She displayed the evidence on the screen. A Washington Post headline from November 27, 2019, phone records reveal web of contacts between Trump allies and Giuliani, and beneath it, a text message exchange. Schiff to WAPO reporter, the key is the frequency of the calls, not the content. We don't know what they said, but the sheer volume implies a conspiracy. Frame it that way. WAPO reporter, but we can't say what was discussed. Schiff, you don't have to, just say the records raise profound questions, let the implication do the work. You violated the privacy of American citizens, including your own colleagues in Congress, and then you weaponized that stolen data to create a false and malicious narrative, Gabbard stated, her words sharp and precise. This is not the behavior of a statesman. This is the behavior of a Stasi agent. From the days, Senator Ron Johnson, a Republican, spoke up, his voice shaking with fury. I was one of the members of Congress whose phone records you illegally obtained and leaked, Congressman. You smeared me on national television, suggesting I was part of some dark plot because I had spoken with Rudy Giuliani. You knew full well we were discussing a completely unrelated legal case, but you didn't care about the truth, did you? The smear was the only thing that mattered. Schiff opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The weight of his accumulated crimes was crushing him, the sheer scale of his corruption now undeniable. But there is one more piece to this puzzle, Gabbard said, her voice dropping, signaling a final, devastating blow. The coordination was not just about leaking stories. It was also about actively suppressing them. It was about censorship. A new set of messages appeared on the screen, this time a group chat with multiple journalists from different outlets. Dated October 2020, Schiff, team, the New York Post story on Hunter Biden's laptop is a Russian disinformation campaign. It is critical for the health of our democracy that this story does not spread. Anyone who runs with it will be seen as a purveyor of foreign propaganda and will lose all access to this committee. Your choice. NBC reporter, but Adam, what if the story is real? Our sources are saying the laptop is authentic. Schiff, it's not. Trust me. And even if it were, this is not the time. Democracy itself is on the line. NBC reporter, isn't censoring a major newspaper also a threat to democracy? Schiff, you are either with us in protecting this country from another for years of Trump, or you are against us. Make your decision. Democracy is at stake, Gabbard repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. That was your justification for everything. It was your excuse for lying, for leaking, for spying, and now for censorship. You appointed yourself the sole arbiter of what information the American people were allowed to see weeks before a presidential election. She looked directly at Schiff, her gaze unflinching. You became the very monster the First Amendment was written to protect us from, a government official who uses his power to control the flow of information to maintain his party's grip on power. You did not protect democracy, Congressman. You strangled it. The hearing room had become a tomb. The remaining reporters sat in stunned silence, their own complicity hanging heavy in the air. The veterans in the gallery watched with the grim satisfaction of men who understood the true meaning of tyranny and were now seeing one of its practitioners brought to justice. One of them, a former Army intelligence officer, leaned over and whispered to his neighbor, "This is worse than anything COINTELPRO ever did." And he did it in plain sight, but Tulsi Gabbard was not finished. She had saved the most personal, the most damning, the most criminal revelation for last. The evidence that would transform Adam Schiff from a disgraced politician into a federal defendant. She paused, her hand resting on a final, ominous-looking folder that had remained closed throughout the entire proceeding. The dramatic tension in the room was almost unbearable. Everyone present, from the senators to the C-SPAN camera operators, sensed that the final, fatal blow was about to be delivered. "Congressman Schiff," Gabbard began, her voice now devoid of all emotion, replaced by something harder, colder, and far more dangerous. "Everything we have discussed so far, the lies, the leaks, the censorship, all of it, as despicable as it is merely a prelude. We are now going to discuss the reason you were so confident in your attacks on me. The reason you felt so secure in branding me a Russian asset. We are going to discuss the secret you thought would never, ever see the light of day." Schiff's face, already a pale mask of defeat, contorted in a new expression of pure, unadulterated terror. His aide, David, was now openly pleading with him, pulling at his suit jacket. "Adam, leave, we have to leave now," but Schiff was paralyzed, transfixed by the folder in Gabbard's hands. "Ladies and gentlemen of the committee," Gabbard announced, her voice ringing with historic gravity, "I am about to show you how a sitting member of Congress used the most powerful surveillance tool in the world to illegally spy on a political rival, a fellow American citizen, and an active duty officer in the United States military." She opened the folder. From the folder, she withdrew a single document. Its cover sheet was a stark, terrifying red with bold black letters at the top, "Top Secret." "FISA, this," Gabbard said, holding it up for all to see, "is a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act application. Submitted to the secret FISA court on March 15, 2019, the target of the surveillance, Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard, United States Army Reserve. The stated justification for the warrant, suspected agent of a foreign power. The authorizing signature on the application, Congressman Adam B. Schiff." The room exploded. It was not a murmur, it was a roar of collective shock and outrage. Senators leapt to their feet, the gallery erupted in angry shouts. Chairman Wicker hammered his gavel, but the sound was lost in the tidal wave of fury. "You spied on me," Gabbard's voice cut through the chaos, a blade of ice. "While I was a sitting member of Congress, while I was wearing the uniform of this country. You took lies and innuendo, and you laundered them through the most secretive and powerful court in this nation to get a warrant to surveil me as if I were a foreign terrorist." She placed the application under a document camera, and its contents filled the screens. Though heavily redacted, the key phrases were visible. Subject Gabbard has demonstrated a pattern of rhetoric that aligns with Russian Federation interests. Travel to Syria suggests potential compromise. Public criticism of U.S. foreign policy is consistent with known information operations. Double quotes every single assertion in this application was a lie, and you knew it, Gabbard continued, her voice a low, controlled fury. "My trip to Syria was a bipartisan codel you yourself were aware of. My public statements were policy positions protected by the First Amendment, but you didn't care about the truth. You wanted to find dirt on a political opponent who challenged your worldview, and you were willing to abuse the awesome power of the surveillance state to do it." Senator Rand Paul, his face crimson with rage, slammed his hand on the table. "This is the nightmare scenario. This is the unconstitutional abuse of power we have been warning about for years. Using FISA to spy on a political opponent, on a soldier, this is monstrous." "But it gets worse," Gabbard said, producing a second FISA document. "This is the renewal application from June 2019. After 3 months of 24/7 electronic surveillance, your spies found nothing. No illicit foreign contacts, no suspicious communications, nothing. But that didn't stop you, did it, Congressman?" She read from the renewal application. Despite a lack of direct evidence, the subject's continued public criticism of the intelligence community's consensus suggests sophisticated counter-surveillance awareness. Recommend expanding authority to include physical surveillance and GPS tracking. You found nothing because there was nothing to find. Gabbard seethed, so you doubled down. You expanded the surveillance from my emails and phone calls to my physical movements. She then produced a series of photographs, placing them one by one under the camera. This is your surveillance team's handiwork. Pictures of me attending my Army Reserve drill weekend. Pictures of me meeting with constituents in my district. Pictures of me having dinner with my husband at a restaurant. You violated not just my privacy, but the privacy of every single person I came into contact with. The veterans in the gallery were on their feet, their faces contorted with a rage that was terrifying to behold. You spied on a soldier in uniform. One of them roared, his voice cracking with emotion, "That's treason." But here, Gabbard said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, is what truly exposes the depth of your depravity. She held up an internal FBI memo. This is from the lead agent of the surveillance team, dated September 2019. He reports, and I quote, "No evidence of any foreign influence, criminal activity, or any wrongdoing has been found. Recommend immediate termination of surveillance, but you couldn't have that, could you?" The final document she produced made several senators physically recoil. It was a copy of the FBI memo with Schiff's own furious handwriting scrawled in the margins. "Unacceptable. If she's clean, it's because you didn't look hard enough. Dig into her family, her finances, her military unit. Everyone has something to hide. Find it. My family," Gabbard said, her voice now trembling with a raw, personal fury that she had suppressed until this moment. "You surveilled my family, my mother, my father. My siblings." More photos appeared on the screen. Her mother at a grocery store, her father gardening, her sister playing with her children in a park. You turned the terrifying power of the United States government against a private American family for no other reason than you could not accept that your political enemy was a patriot. Senator Ted Cruz stood up. "Mr. Chairman, I move that this committee immediately and formally refer Congressman Adam Schiff to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation for violations of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and abuse of power." "Seconded," shouted a chorus of voices. But Gabbard held up a hand, silencing the room. "There's one last thing. Your illegal surveillance did not just violate my rights. It actively endangered the lives of American soldiers." She produced a classified after-action report. "This is from my unit's deployment exercise in July 2019. Your surveillance team was so clumsy, so obvious that they were detected by the host nation's intelligence service, who initially mistook them for hostile foreign operatives. It nearly triggered an international incident and directly compromised the operational security of my entire unit. Soldiers' lives were put at risk because of your sick political games." She closed the final folder with a resounding thud. "This is why I am here. Not just to be confirmed, but to ensure that this never, ever happens again. Never again will our intelligence agencies be the political playthings of corrupt politicians. Never again will the power to spy be used to silence dissent. Never again will men like you be allowed to rot our republic from the inside out." Schiff finally spoke, his voice a pathetic, broken whisper. "I was protecting national security." "No," Gabbard replied, her voice ringing with the absolute certainty of truth. "You were protecting yourself, and in doing so, you became a domestic enemy of the Constitution of the United States." She turned to the committee. "When confirmed, my first act will be to order a full declassification of every politically motivated surveillance operation of the past decade. The American people will see what was done in their name in the dark. And there will be a reckoning." The hearing room descended into chaos. As FBI agents entered and escorted a catatonic Adam Schiff from the room, the committee moved to an immediate, unanimous vote to confirm Gabbard. Her nomination was approved in a matter of minutes. In the weeks that followed, the system was purged. Schiff was indicted on multiple federal charges. The media outlets that had been his accomplices faced a catastrophic loss of public trust and a barrage of lawsuits. And from her new office as Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard began the long, arduous process of cleaning out the rot. Her first official directive was simple: declassify it all. The truth, she knew, was the only disinfectant powerful enough to heal the wounds the nation had suffered. The warrior had won the battle, not just for her own reputation, but for the very soul of the country she had sworn to defend.